Hello everybody, I'm Professor Bruno Silva, and on today's video we will be discussing the importance of palatability as a tool to improve the piglet's voluntary feed intake and performance. Taste perception helps pigs to assess diet quality through the recognition of at least 5 basic tastes. So we have sweet, umami, sour, salty, and bitter. Most commercial feeds are formulated based on plant-derived ingredients, which contain bitter compounds. So in addition, we also use in our feed formulations phytogenic and pharmaceutical additives, which are used to improve gut health, which are used to improve digestibility. But most of these additives, they can also trigger taste receptors and cause behavioral aversions to feed. So bitter tasting ingredients can also lead to pigs having a lower feed acceptability. So these components can even trigger satiety signals, which in turn decrease feed intake and compromise animal performance. In one of our previous studies, we evaluated the impact of different feed flavor concepts on voluntary feed intake of piglets post-weaning. And one of the conclusions from our study is that if we can stimulate properly these animals in the first week post-weaning, this will yield a better performance of these animals at the end of nursery. So this shows to us that voluntary feed intake during the first week post-weaning, immediately after post-weaning, is directly correlated to the performance and to the outcome at the end of nursery of these animals. Young animals can start learning which food types are healthy from the mother before weaning and even before birth. Perinatal flavor learning through the maternal diet is known to enhance flavor preference and acceptance of flavored diets in many species. Previously, we found positive effects of perinatal flavor learning on voluntary feed intake, growth and behavior of piglets post-weaning. This suggests that flavor learning in pigs works through a reduction of weaning stress by the presence of a familiar flavor. So the concept of imprinting involved in choosing a flavor to be included in a sow's early lactation diet could be a viable strategy. These flavors could be transferred into the milk. If the same flavor is then included in a creep feed, the newborns are immediately familiar with them and should eat more and even sooner. Taste and smell that are familiar and associated with a positive experience or environment can result in a strong positive memory recall and consequently affect feeding behavior. The association of the taste and smell with a positive context may be strongest when the context is related to the sow. In this sense, the application of these types of concepts are not only limited to voluntary feed intake, to stimulate diet intake, but can also be used to stimulate an improvement in terms of performance, of adaptation, of behavior to the new environment. And also can be used as an interesting strategy, for instance, to increase voluntary water intake. We know that water is an essential component for the piglets, especially in the first days post-weaning, so that you can avoid dehydration. So, for instance, we published recently a paper where we looked into the impact of, again, using a dose response of flavors in the water for piglets already during lactation phase, and then we carried on the same concept, the same component during nursery. And what we saw was an incredible increase in water intake, not only during lactation phase, but also during the nursery phase, which was directly correlated to the improvement in feed intake and overall performance. So we see clearly that this type of concept, so the use of palatability, is a very interesting and viable strategy to reduce the impacts of stress, of weaning, but also to stimulate feed intake and also to stimulate water intake. As take-home messages, we can argue that feeding pigs with a well-balanced diet that is highly palatable is essential for optimal growth performance and production efficiency. We also have to understand that bitter tasting ingredients can lead to pigs having a lower feed acceptability and in turn decrease feed intake and compromise the performance. We also saw that pigs show different preference for certain flavors when given a choice. And understanding that the use of the concept of imprinting is an efficient mechanism to prepare the piglets for challenging phases such as weaning and the first week post-weaning. So the enhancement of taste or smell through the use of flavors may help to improve the palatability of the diets and consequently overall voluntary feed intake and performance of these animals.